Is Donald Trump unstoppable? It's now a two-person race for the Republican nomination. Tonight, we ask what Trump's return to the White House would mean for all of us in this, the biggest ever election year. There's just one woman blocking his place on the ticket, Nikki Haley, after Ron DeSantis dropped out of the race.
We have the highest level of enthusiasm that anybody's ever seen, ever.
Tonight, we travel through America's Midwest to hear why controversy and court cases have done little to harm Donald Trump's chances.
Absolutely. I'll vote for Donald Trump again.
Trump will change things around.
He put America first.
I think he needs to learn to keep his mouth shut.
In order for change to happen, sometimes chaos ensues.
And we ask how Britain would deal with the return of Donald Trump. I'll put that to the man who could soon be Foreign Secretary, David Lammy. Also coming up on the programme, we hear from an 18-year-old Israeli facing jail for refusing to fight. That says the government there faces increasing pressure from the families of hostages still being held. And how India's Narendra Modi revived religious tensions with the construction of a new Hindu temple. That's all coming up on The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Hello and welcome to The World with me, Yalda Hakim. It's our first programme for the year, and what a time to launch a global news show. We all know this is a moment of deep division and distrust. We're going to try to resist all that here while recognising different perspectives and the fact that there are humans on every side. Ultimately, it'll be up to you, the viewer, to make up your own mind. So my first question this evening, what is it about Donald Trump? Overnight, one of his main Republican challengers, Ron DeSantis, the man billed as Trump without the chaos, pulled out of the race to be the party's presidential nominee. That's because voters appear willing to ignore the 91 criminal charges against the former president and his not-so-veiled threats of revenge. Two wars, the threat from China, immigration. Donald Trump has already left a trail of clues hinting at how he'd change US foreign policy. So how would a Labour government deal with him? In a moment, I'll be putting that question to the man who could be Foreign Secretary at the end of this year, David Lammy. But let's get started in the very centre of America, where our US correspondent Mark Stone has been investigating the apparently enduring appeal of Donald Trump.
It's a week since Donald Trump stormed to victory in Iowa. His road back to the White House a little clearer. But why? How is a man so divisive, so polarizing, so surrounded by chaos, so popular still? Here, in America's Midwest, it's clear.
I've been here basically my whole life.
The land here on the plains of Nebraska is Mike Kubik's. His business is grain, his politics is conservative, and his life is good.
Excellent. I love my job. I've never had a bad day.
Nebraska's economy is good. Unemployment is low. It has among the nation's largest gains in personal income. It mirrors a national trend. But Mike's story reflects the puzzle of American politics right now. His lot may be good, but it just felt better before. And inflation is biting.
We've more than doubled our fuel. That costs there. Our chemicals have gone up. Our fertilizer has gone up. The cost of equipment has gone up. Food is terrible. And our government doesn't seem to care.
So you have a nostalgia for the Trump years. Things were better then for you.
Yes, he put America first. We had no wars. All them people that died in Russia and Ukraine, they'd still be alive today if Donald Trump was president.
You believe that?
I honestly believe that. Because he'd go there and he'd take both sides and he'd negotiate.
This has long been a conservative heartland, of course. But nostalgia for Trump in particular is everywhere here. And you sense it's as much about the deep flaws they see on the other side.
I think now, in these last 4 years, I haven't felt a lot of attention to agriculture from this administration.
At one level or another, most here are in agriculture. Trey Stevens is a crop scientist. He helps the farmers to make a profit.
It always felt like Trump was in control. And you know, right now, these last 4 years, it's kind of like who is in control.
looking in on America from beyond. I think people struggle to understand what the appeal is of a man who seems to be divisive. He seems to drive quite a lot of chaos.
Right. Yeah. I think, man, in order for change to happen, sometimes chaos ensues, and Trump is not afraid of that. I try to remove myself from a lot of the things he says and focus on the things that he does. If it was my wish, have a businessman that's strong like Trump, but maybe just doesn't say as much, you know?
As the interstate cuts south, Nebraska becomes Kansas, but the politics doesn't shift much. The weekly auction draws ranchers and their cattle from across the state.
When Trump was in office, it was a lot more steady. We're just on a roller coaster with Biden as far as what happens with our markets.
What about Trump the man? I mean, he's pretty unique.
He annoys me.
Why?
I think he needs to learn to keep his mouth shut on some things. I think he's very good with business, but I think he says some things he shouldn't. And sometimes he just needs to be quiet and, you know.
Who's the answer then politically? Who's going to make America better?
Well, I think Trump will change things around if he gets back in. I really do. I think it's going to get our border closed up, get things back to normal.
But then a moment that cuts to the heart of a divide that's set so deep. What do you think the attraction of Trump is? Because he seems to still have such a hold on the country.
Absolutely nothing to me because me personally, I am engaged to a woman, so it's not a really safe thing around here to just outwardly express, especially in this culture. So personally for me, I am currently searching for a state to live in and have a safe future. So that's something really real that I have to think about that a lot of people don't.
It's quite a profound thing, really, to feel like you can't necessarily be here because of you, because of what you feel and what you represent.
It's a scary thing, yeah. A lot of people think it's choice, but
Temperance way 440. 204 now, 5 now, a bit another 5, another 6 here, a bit another now 7. $1 now 2, now 2, now 3, bid 3, now 4, and you just have to speed it up a whole bunch, right?
To keep people engaged.
Yeah, it is. So it's a very fun way to make a living. We live here in the middle of the United States. I think that people on both the east and west coast where there's high populations, I think they probably forget where their food comes from.
And what do you think about the two people that appear to be the front runners to be president?
Yeah, you'd think we could find better nominees than that, wouldn't you? I don't know why the Democrats and Republicans can't come up with younger candidates or candidates that don't have any baggage, it appears, because both of them have baggage. The Biden side obviously has baggage, and Donald Trump seems to be in and out of court, and there's issues there. But we're going to vote with who our nominees are.
And for you, that means Trump's the man.
Absolutely. I'll vote for Donald Trump again.
A journey of conversations through the heart of America ends at its very heart. A small chapel marks the geographical center of the United States. It is the nation's center point, its middle ground. Right now, hard to find. Mark Stone, Sky News in Kansas.
Well, as the former president gains a boost in the US, the polls in the UK are suggesting a Labour win at the next general election. It means one man in particular could have the job of dealing with the new Trump administration. The man in question, Shadow Foreign Secretary David Lammy, joins me now. Thank you so much, Mr. Lammy, for joining us here on the programme. As I said, if the polls are to be believed, you're likely to be Britain's new Foreign Secretary. And I guess if the polls are to be believed in the United States, it'll be Donald Trump, potentially in the White House in the next 9 months. Are you prepared to work with Donald Trump?
Well, Yalda, let me just say that there's a long time between now and any general election. And I mean, I've been in politics now 24 years. And the truth is, you just never know.
Sure, 9 months is a long time in politics.
When you go to the British people, you never know. And US politics, to be honest, the primaries have just begun. But of course we'll work with Donald Trump, because we will work with whoever America elects. And it doesn't matter whether it's Nixon or Bush or Kennedy. It doesn't matter who's in number 10. You work with the United States.
It won't impact the special relationship? Britain won't rethink the special relationship?
The UK and the US, alongside Australia and New Zealand and Canada, have the best intelligence capability in the world. We see the world in similar ways. The UK and the US are permanent members of the Security Council of the United Nations. Look, of course, as a backbencher, and many backbencher MPs have had strong views about Donald Trump.
You have.
And the things he said in the past. I'm not going to deny that.
You described him as a racist Nazi.
Look, I think all backbenchers of both sides, and I know that the current Foreign Secretary, David Cameron, described him as a misogynist and xenophobic. So all of us are going to have a backstory in relation to that. But the truth is, if I have the privilege of becoming Foreign Secretary, it will be my job to represent the national interests of this country.
Sure, and I do...
you have to put to one side
the feelings and personal opinions. But
Yeah.
let's just pull up the quote, what you said. You said, Trump is not only a woman-hating neo-Nazi, sympathising sociopath, he's also a profound threat to the international order that has been the foundation of Western progress for so long. Do you still think that?
Well, look, I do worry that Donald Trump was not keen on NATO, because I think it's a fundamental plank of European and global security. I do worry that Donald Trump and some members of the Republican Party have taken a view that the financing and standing by the people of Ukraine, standing by Zelensky, is something that America can turn its back on. That worries me greatly. And so part of the job of being Foreign Secretary, if I have the privilege to do that here in the UK, is also to try and persuade and use your influence. And so it would be my sincere hope that Donald Trump recognises that this is a very challenging geopolitical moment with Russia waging war in Ukraine and threatening its neighbours. If he were to win, he would move beyond that.
He has said that, you know, he may pull out of NATO if there is a Trump 2.0.
Well, look, I hope that that is not the case, and I would do all I can, and I know Keir Starmer would, alongside lots of European allies, to persuade him otherwise.
But do you think that NATO would survive?
Well, of course that NATO would survive, but that's not really the question. The question is that after the Second World War, an architecture was set up. In fact, Clem Attlee and Ernest Bevin, who was Foreign Secretary of the Labour Party at the time, were instrumental in setting up NATO. And it's given us global security as a consequence. Article 5, very, very important that we all join together to ensure that we have safety in our numbers. And I think it would be a huge strategic mistake for so many people across the world if the United States were to step back from that.
So if the United States does step back, though, under a Labour government, would Britain step up in terms of defence spending?
Well, look, when we left office, defence spending was standing at 2.5% of GDP. That has not been matched in any years in which the Conservatives have been in power. We have the smallest army at any time since the Napoleonic War. 1 in 5 of our ships have been cut. We've lost 200 planes just in the last 5 years. So we have seen a huge reduction by this government, and that's why we've said the first thing we'll do, if we have the privilege of serving, is have a strategic defence review and set us on the course that's necessary.
Is it Labour then, given what you've said, the damage done to Britain's defence force, isn't Labour going to inherit a very hollow force?
The truth is, I think that people recognise that across public spending, this is not 1997. What we would inherit if we were to win is a huge challenge, no doubt about it. But we have to set our priorities very clearly. We've got a budget in March. We've got a spending review probably in September before the next election. So we'll see what we inherit. But clearly, after Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng, our finances are in a mess, no doubt about it.
I've just got a few minutes, but I want to talk about military support to Ukraine, because Donald Trump says he will cut it off. Will a Labour government step up and provide whatever Ukraine needs?
I saw President Zelensky inviting Donald Trump to come to Ukraine, and I hope that Donald Trump takes up that challenge and goes to Ukraine like I have. And
well, he's also said that he could end the war in 24 hours. Do you believe him?
I think that would be hard to pull off. But it may be that Putin, he has influence on Putin that I have not seen, or none of us have yet seen. But I have to say, if you look at where Russian troops are currently dug in, you look at the arsenal and the shells and the munition that Putin has, it looks like he's intent on waging war for some considerable time.
Then is it time to negotiate with Russia?
Look, I'm really clear. We will stand with Zelensky and the Ukrainian people.
Standing
in this country,
is one thing, but offering military support, they need about 30 billion at this point.
We press the government to come forward with spending. They came forward with 2.5 billion last
Under
week.
a Labour government,
we
though.
welcome that, and we will stand with Ukraine for as long as it takes. Of course, that's alongside our European allies, but I think everyone recognises the importance of winning this fight.
I don't have long, but I want to talk about the Middle East very, very quickly. Of course, you've said that there needs to be a sustained ceasefire. You've been very critical of Benjamin Netanyahu rejecting a two-state solution. Do you think the Americans have been tough enough on Benjamin Netanyahu?
Look, I think that it's extraordinary to suggest that there can't be a two-state solution, because the consequences of not having a two-state solution is having a one-state solution, in which case you would have to explain how Palestinian and Israelis can live side by side with equality and rights and self-determination. I think that's going to be very hard. Or you have no state, in which what you're effectively saying is that occupation continues, that siege continues, and that dire circumstances continue for many, many Palestinian people. I think that's unacceptable. And that's why Americans and the UK and our allies in Europe, most of the world recognises that the only way forward is a diplomatic solution, and that must be predicated on two states.
So then, in your view, should Prime Minister Netanyahu resign?
Oh, look, I have to take the world as it is, not as I would like it to be. That is a decision for the people of Israel. They must determine who they want to lead their country. Of course, I follow the politics in Israel, but that is a determination for them. It's not a determination for me.
David Lammy, thank you so much for joining us here on the programme.
Thank you.
Well, it was clear there just how pivotal the outcome of this year's US election will be. Voters will next have their say in New Hampshire, where Donald Trump is ahead in the polls. Our US correspondent James Matthews joins us now. And James, I mean, many are saying it's quite a treacherous path now for Nikki Haley, but is there any chance she could derail Donald Trump now?
Yes, there has to be a chance, Yalda. In theory, she could beat Donald Trump in New Hampshire, although I have to say that in truth, it would be a major surprise. It would certainly be a huge story if she overturned his commanding lead here. I mean, the average polls show that he's double digits ahead in New Hampshire. The thing about this place, though, is it's fertile ground for Nikki Haley, as good as it gets in terms of the electorate that she will want to tap into. 40% of people who will participate in the Republican nomination process here tomorrow are independents. They're moderate. And Haley needs to pull together that coalition. Independents, soft Republicans, perhaps some of the DeSantis vote that's decanted, that surely will decant into both Trump and Haley camps. Pull that together and run Donald Trump close. If not beat him, at least come a close second, to demonstrate to the broader electorate and, crucially, her financial backers that her campaign can be propelled forward to more challenging situations in different states where she doesn't enjoy the same kind of conditions that she does here.
So in the event that she does stay on after New Hampshire, what happens after that?
Well, she needs to build further belief that she can continue on in this race, bearing in mind that the next key point in the nomination race is South Carolina. Different situation to what she has in New Hampshire. Donald Trump, he's double digits ahead here. He is way out in front in that particular state, with key figures in the Republican establishment standing 4 square behind him. So, you know, she does face tougher challenges going on, and she will need to demonstrate here in particular to financial backers who have thrown millions at her campaign and may throw millions more. She needs to demonstrate that they will get a return on their investment. It's the kind of investment that Ron DeSantis didn't make good on. That's why he dropped out. And she wants to stay in this race for as long as she can, bearing in mind the context. Donald Trump's legal troubles may well encroach on his political ambitions. It may be that further down the line there is a job opportunity in terms of the Republican nomination if he is forced to drop out. Nikki Haley wants to be still in the game at that point.
James, thank you so much, and all eyes will be on New Hampshire over the next 48 hours. Well, with me here in the studio tonight is the financier and author Bill Browder and the journalist and filmmaker Dr. Miriam Francois. Thank you both for joining us here on the programme. Bill, we're just hearing there from the Shadow Foreign Secretary talking about Ukraine. Of course, you are a long-time Kremlin critic. If we talk about a win for Donald Trump over the next 9 months. And you know, David Lammy did say 9 months is a long time in politics, so it's not a fait accompli as yet. But what should Ukraine do if Trump does win?
Well, there's one really crucial thing which will happen if Trump wins, which is that he will cut off American money for Ukraine. And about half the money that comes to Ukraine for their military support and their financial support comes from the United States. There's one Trump insurance policy, which is after the war started, all the central banks, all the Western central banks of the world froze $350 billion of Russian central bank reserves. And so the one way we could get around this financing problem is to not just freeze that money, but to confiscate that money and to use it for Ukraine. There's a lot of people talking about it, including the Foreign Secretary David Cameron right now. And that would be one way to basically solve the problem.
And you've been talking about this for a long time, but what should Europe do? Because, of course, the United States, if they pull out any kind of financial support, military support for Ukraine, what can Europeans do to step in and step up?
Well, spend more money, which is a very unpalatable thing to be talking about in a moment when we're all suffering from inflation and economic hardship. But this is kind of Europe's moment, because if America isolates, which is a real serious possibility, it's not as if the Ukraine problem goes away. If Putin wins in Ukraine, he's said it. He will go on to the next country, which might be Poland.
I'm just going to bring in Dr. Francois. I mean, just listening there to Bill Browder, do you feel the solution is that Europe needs to spend more?
Wow, at a time where households in this country are struggling to feed their children, struggling to pay their bills, where most people my generation and younger are likely to never own a home, where our prospects are we're entering, the 4th recession of my lifetime, I think that is very disconnected from the reality of what people are experiencing. I understand where it's coming from, but I also think that the narrative of more war is not one that feeds anything inside me and inside anyone I know.
I'm just going to get a reaction there from Bill Browder. I mean, there are a lot of people who feel this way.
Well, I mean, of course we don't want to spend any more money. Of course we want you to have homes and all that great stuff. But we're in a situation where Putin has launched a war of aggression. He's not backing off. He's not backing down. He wants to win. And the next thing that happens if he wins in Ukraine is he then goes on to challenge Poland or Estonia or Latvia or Lithuania. And if he does that, it's a much, much more expensive situation. Then we have to make the choice. These countries are NATO allies. Do we go and defend them, which is our NATO duty? Or do we just say, you know what, you're on your own, let's just have total chaos in Europe?
All I'm going to say is that in any war, at a certain point, that there is a stalemate. People either run out of money or they run out of goodwill, and you need to sit down and you need to talk. And I understand that the narrative around Putin is that he's intractable and that we can't even sit down with the madman. But from where I'm standing, I feel like it's a hyper-masculine discourse. I feel like we need to sit down and we need to find a solution that doesn't involve more bloodshed, more violence, more money going to the arms industry. And it should absolutely. It's overdue. It's what everyone wants. We don't want more war. People are so tired of this idea that everyone needs to sacrifice to basically pump more weapons into a region that's fundamentally unstable and is not going to retain stability just by force. I understand there's this narrative that he's a strong man, that force is the only way. I'm sorry, I don't buy it. I'm from a generation that doesn't buy that. We want to get back to the table. Let's talk. Let's find a solution. No one will be happy with it. We know that. That's how negotiations work. There is no one that walks away from a peace discussion happy. But it's a peace discussion, and that's what we need to be talking about, not more war.
Bill, just very briefly, 30 seconds, what would negotiating with Russia look like?
There is no negotiation with Russia. Putin isn't negotiating. He's not sitting down at any negotiating table. It's just, it's a fantasy. Of course, this was not a war that anyone wanted. Nobody wanted this war. Putin wants this war, and in order for him to stay alive and in power, he needs to stay at war. He's not sitting down at any negotiating table, no matter how much we want it.
OK, well, we need to go to a break, but we will be speaking to you a little bit more about other stories we're covering here on the programme. So stay with me, because after the break, we'll hear from an 18-year-old Israeli man who could go back to jail tomorrow after refusing to enlist in the army. And as protesters storm the country's parliament, we'll ask if defiance at home poses a new challenge for Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Plus, the man dubbed the Timhuti Shamale on how he's using TikTok. We'll discuss how social media, for better or for worse, is shaping how young people understand conflict.
We've got a colony of 16 Gen 2 penguins here at Sea Life London, and this morning, it's cleaning and swim time for them. They get up with the daylight, which comes on at about 9 o'clock at the moment. First thing they do, go for a nice little swim, a little bit of a wash, and then stand around waiting for the keepers to come along. I think most people are aware of penguins, but the main point of Penguin Awareness Day is to raise awareness for the things they are facing in the wild, which are reducing some species numbers. Like African penguins, for example. They are the most endangered penguin. They face a lot of habitat threats, overfishing, climate change. All those factors combined are having an effect on some penguins in the wild, which is a shame. So as fun as they are to watch and just see them do all their weird things, building nests out of rocks, it's important to be mindful that these guys are facing some challenges in the wild. Gen 2s as a whole, they are some of the nicest penguins. They've all stopped. They're very curious. I'll just turn it this way. You can see they're all watching me. There we go. But yeah, I don't want to be on camera. I watch from the side. So yeah, they're very curious animals. Which is really nice to sort of see. But also, yeah, they are incredible divers. They are the fastest swimming species of penguins. They can swim at about 22 miles per hour. Which is pretty speedy. They're quite a small species of penguin, so because of that, they're a little bit more cautious and curious, just because there's a couple of predators in the wild. You'll find these guys around the Falkland Isles. So they don't usually live on the ice like you imagine most penguins. They're usually on a bit of dirt or a bit of grass, and they dig a little, don't dig a little hole, but they'll find somewhere like that. So penguins do nest and live in a variety of places, not just in Antarctica.
Welcome back. We're going to take a closer look at Israel now, where Benjamin Netanyahu is continuing to reject a future two-state solution with the Palestinian people. It's important to recognise that the Israeli Prime Minister's opinions aren't shared by everyone in the country. Today, the families of hostages burst into the country's parliament, the Knesset, and branded members of the coalition government as traitors who have given up on the hostages. Today, Sky News heard from 18-year-old Tal Mitnick, who will return to prison tomorrow after refusing to enlist. He's been speaking to our Middle East correspondent, Alistair Bunkle, in Tel Aviv.
Tal Mitnick is the first Israeli conscientious objector to be sent to jail since the Gaza war began last October. He was sent to military prison for 30 days for refusing to serve in the Israeli military and was released last Friday.
I arrived at the enlistment place. I told them I'm not doing this. I refuse. They sent me to the holding cell, and then I got sentenced for 30 days.
Do you think some of the people that you served time with, or some of the guards, or even the wider Israeli public consider you a traitor?
I don't only think, I've heard it a lot of times before. I don't consider myself a traitor, obviously. I think that I'm working for both the best interests of Israelis and Palestinians, because none of us are free until we are all free. It's only peace and it's only freedom that will bring us security.
Benjamin Netanyahu is coming under increasing pressure to agree a new hostage deal. Today, families interrupted a committee in the Knesset urging the government to do more to bring their relatives home.
The objective of the war is to eliminate Hamas and to bring back the hostages. It can't be achieved with more and more fighting because, like we saw, the way that we brought back the hostages at the end of the day was a deal where we exchanged prisoners for hostages. Okay.
As we're talking, Tal receives a call from the IDF.
Bye. That's from the military.
Saying what?
They told me now I have to come on Tuesday instead of Monday, so.
You'll refuse to serve again, will you?
Yes. They think that sentencing me for 30 days will somehow make me feel threatened, but I stay with my beliefs and I'll refuse to serve once again.
And you fully expect to go back to prison?
Yes, on Tuesday afternoon or evening, I'll be sent back to prison for another sentence.
Must play on your mind a bit.
I think to myself that I've gone through 30, I can take another 30, and I can take another 30 after that because I know that a lot of people support me, and that I'm succeeding in making a change and showing the world that there's another way and that we can choose nonviolence over violence.
The Israeli assault of Gaza continues. Israel has generally been united since the October the 7th terror attacks. Tal Mitnick's conscientious objection is rare, but the voices of protest and dissent are becoming louder. Alistair Bunkle, Sky News, in Tel Aviv.
Well, I can speak now to Danny Danon, a senior member of Israel's Knesset, and Haggai Matter, a journalist and political activist. Thank you both for joining us. Mr. Danon, I'll come to you first. And before we begin, I just want to show this video of families of hostages storming the Knesset today and describing members of the coalition government as traitors who have given up on the hostages. We're just looking at those images right now. I mean, your response to these families, because increasingly people in Israel are becoming frustrated with how things are going and the fact that these hostages, about 130 of them, still remain in Gaza.
We stand together with the families of the hostages, and we have to realize that what we are experiencing is ongoing atrocities against the hostages. As we speak, 136 hostages are being held in captivity in Gaza, are being raped, tortured. We heard testimonies from those who were able to come back. So we understand their emotions. We realize.
But Mr. Danon, what I'm talking about here, and of course, in the last 100 days or so, we've reported extensively on the situation of the hostages. But what I'm talking about here is the response of the Netanyahu government. Increasingly, people are frustrated in Israel, and we saw what happened there in the Knesset.
So people want to see results. And we will get results. It will take more time. And I think what we should do, we should change the way we act in Gaza. You know, you in Sky News, you speak all the time about the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, but what about our humanitarian crisis? What about the hostages? I think it's about time we reconsider what we are actually doing, the way we're treating Hamas terrorists. We have to change the course of actions in order to bring back the hostages. And the families, I stand with them. You know, it's not easy to be a family member when you know that your loved one is being tortured day and night by Hamas terrorists.
OK, I'm just going to bring in Haggai into the conversation. Haggai, Mr. Danon was saying there that what people want are results. But frankly, about 106 days into this conflict, and the Israeli people, the international community, hasn't seen the results that the Israeli government continues to promise.
Yes, I think it's very clear that from the beginning, the notion that releasing the hostages through a military campaign was false, and more people, and especially the families of the hostages, are seeing that now. What the Netanyahu government is doing is this criminal campaign against Palestinians, killing thousands of Palestinian citizens, causing a humanitarian crisis, and not doing anything to either topple Hamas, remove extremism, or free the hostages. We know that hostages will only be released through a negotiated deal. The last batch of hostages that were released in a hostage release deal in exchange for Palestinian prisoners and a ceasefire. It's going to be the same the next time if the hostages make it. But that depends on the Netanyahu government willing to negotiate and willing to end the war and free prisoners in exchange for those.
I just want to bring in Mr. Danon here on some of the points that Haggai has raised there. I mean, you talk about the results, but, you know, when we look at the number of Hamas leaders that have been killed over the last 106 days or so, you haven't managed to target any of the top Hamas leaders in Gaza. The impact has been felt on the civilian population.
So as you know, that the Hamas leadership are cowards. They are hiding in the tunnels. They are not actually fighting with our soldiers. But we were able to target many of them. And today, Hamas capabilities are not the same. And the fact is that, you know, you don't hear about rockets landing in our cities anymore. That is because we attacked many of the sites of the terror activities, and we will continue to do that. We knew it's going to be a long operation. We intend to continue and to eradicate Hamas. It will take time, but we cannot sit idly by after October 7th. We are determined to finish the job this time. And I want to remind you and the audience that the last time we released the hostages was after we used a significant amount of force that forced Hamas to negotiate with us. I think we have to go back to the same tactics we used at the beginning of the war. That is the only way that will bring us to another hostages agreement.
OK, Mr. Danny Danon and Haggai Matter, thank you both for joining us here on the programme. OK, we've got some breaking news that's just come in. The US and British militaries have, for a second time, conducted joint airstrikes targeting Houthi missile sites in Yemen. Let's go straight to our Middle East correspondent, Alistair Bunkle. And Alistair, we've heard over the last few weeks about a number of strikes conducted by the US and UK militaries. And again, some news coming through that for a second time, US and British militaries have conducted these joint airstrikes targeting Houthi missile sites in Yemen.
Yeah, I mean, no confirmation from Washington or London yet that either country has been involved in the airstrikes in Yemen, but a lot of reports coming from Yemen itself and from the wider Middle East region that airstrikes have been carried out within literally the last few minutes in Yemen, including in the Yemenis capital Sana'a. And this would be the second major wave of airstrikes by the Americans and British, assuming that that is who's behind this. Since it's been, just over a week now since they carried out that first wave of airstrikes against about 60 targets in Yemen. The Americans have, in between time, have carried out a couple of limited strikes, but nothing on this kind of scale. The Americans and the British, well, they carried out those airstrikes initially as a first sort of punch on the nose to the Houthis in Yemen to try and stop them from carrying out attacks on shipping in the Red Sea. I don't think anybody believed that that was going to be effective enough. And I think the Americans and the British knew that they might be drawn into this even deeper still. And I think tonight's attacks, assuming that it is confirmed that it is the Americans and British behind it, just goes to show that both the Houthi attacks on Red Sea shipping is continuing, but very much that Washington and London are being pulled into something that could be much, much longer than they really want it to be.
Indeed, that is the big question. Are these airstrikes making a difference? Ali, thank you so much for bringing us up to date there. And that was some breaking news there that for a second time, the US and British militaries have conducted joint airstrikes targeting Houthi missile sites in Yemen. Now, next up, we're going to talk about India, the controversial Hindu temple built on the site where a mosque was torn down by a mob. India's Prime Minister backed the construction plan. Could it boost his re-election bid? Welcome back. We opened the show talking about the race for the White House, arguably the biggest political event of the year. And yet, when it comes to size, no election compares to India's, the world's most populous nation. Voters will likely go to the polls in the spring, and today, Prime Minister Narendra Modi was celebrating something of an early victory. He opened a grand Hindu temple in the city of Ayodhya to the delight of his supporters. But it's enraged the country's Muslim population. Our India correspondent Neville Lazarus was there as the temple was unveiled.
A 19th century dispute mired in litigation for decades has finally culminated into the Ram Temple, consecrated by Prime Minister Modi, calling it a dawn of a new era.
सदियों की प्रतीक्षा के बाद हमारे राम आ गए.
After centuries of waiting, our Ram has arrived. Centuries of unprecedented patience, countless sacrifices and penance. Our Lord has arrived.
The result, jubilation in the streets, while some emotional.
There are no words for today. History has changed. For 1,000 years, we've endured this injustice. We have been given freedom. India has gained freedom for the first time today.
Hindus believe the site where the Babri Mosque existed for almost 500 years is the birthplace of Lord Ram. A movement to reclaim this land led to the demolition of the mosque in 1992 against court orders and an administration that did not intervene. It was followed by some of the worst communal riots. Over 2,000 people were killed, mostly Muslims. In 2019, the Supreme Court awarded the ownership to the Hindus and gave the Muslims land 15 miles away. It's desolate and barren. There are no signs of a construction of an alternate mosque.
It was wrong, but we have to live within the confines of the Constitution. We have to obey it, whether the decision is right or wrong.
The Ram Temple has been the cornerstone of right-wing politics, helping bring the party to power. This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party, a promise fulfilled. This will garner him support in the upcoming general elections. Muscular Hindu nationalism has caused communal tensions and a widening social divide since Modi came to power in 2014. It has also led to a growing hostility and violence against the Muslim minority in India. Neville Lazarus, Sky News in Ayodhya, Uttar Pradesh.
Well, a little earlier I spoke to Rana Ayoub, an opinion columnist with the Washington Post, on what was an emotional day for many in the Muslim community.
It has been a very traumatizing affair because I myself have been a child of the 92 riots, basically the riots, the communal riots that took place after the Babri Masjid demolition. So in many ways, many of us survivors were looking for closure, but this moment was not one of them. Also, in the name of faith, what Mr. Modi did today was make it into a spectacle of sorts, a Hindu nationalist spectacle for a country of 1.4 billion people, which is the world's largest democracy. But today it resembled a Hindu nation, a prime minister who was doing those Hindu rituals at the inauguration of an under construction temple 3 months before elections, over a mosque that was demolished by a mob, after which 1,000 people were killed. It should have been yeah.
Yeah, I just want to ask you about that because, of course, there are millions of Hindus who say, along with the Prime Minister, that this is where the Hindu god Ram was born. And therefore, this is more about celebrating Hindu civilization rather than reverting back or thinking back to those riots.
Because, he has done exactly what Trump is doing in America, making a majority Hindu feel like victims in their own country, that they have been wronged for centuries. In fact, today's moment is being seen as a historical wrong being corrected by Modi, and Modi being the chosen one who's bringing Lord Ram back. If you see all the campaign, the photographs all over the country, it has Lord Ram with Prime Minister Modi everywhere. So this is not about faith. This is about the politicization of faith. And one can be rest assured, Yalda, that with the spectacle that he has created, that a man who has brought the Hindu pride back in the country, I feel there is no way that Modi is going to lose.
That was Rana Ayoub. But let's just remind you of our breaking news this hour. For a second time, the United Kingdom and the United States have launched joint airstrikes on Houthi rebel targets in Yemen. So that's news that just came in about 10 or 15 minutes ago here, that for a second time, US and British militaries have conducted joint airstrikes targeting Houthi missile sites in Yemen. We've brought our panel back, Bill Browder and Dr. Miriam Francois, to respond and react to this news. Bill Browder, first to you.
I mean, these guys are terrorists. They're obstructing all trade. They're creating inflation. They're creating supply chain problems. Commercial vessels can't go through the Red Sea. Something's got to be done. And this is absolutely necessary to stop these terrorists from obstructing free trade.
Dr. Francois, I mean, there are many who are saying that, frankly, the Biden administration should have acted sooner and faster, that hundreds of billions of dollars has been put at risk because the Houthis have held this area in the Red Sea at ransom.
Sorry, so just let me get this straight, Yalda. So we are bombing one of the poorest countries in the world that has been under a humanitarian blockade. There has been famine. These people have been decimated. And we are bombing them because a couple of guys in dinghies in support for the Palestinians who are having a genocide committed against them, they're objecting to that, and we're bombing them? Come on now. I mean, this is just an insane world for us to even think. I'm so sorry your Amazon packages are delayed. I really am. Like, I wish mine came on time. But, you know, genocide, guys, genocide. There are 2 mothers a day dying in Gaza right now. It's 109 days into a conflict in which a humanitarian crisis has been declared to the world day in, day out.
By the way, Dr. Francois, there are many who are Yemen watchers who monitor and follow the Houthis who say this is doing wonders for their branding, actually, that it isn't just the Palestinian cause that they're focused on.
So call a ceasefire now and end the positive branding. If you want to stop the Houthis doing what they're doing, then call a ceasefire right now.
Do you genuinely believe that the Houthis would stop doing what they're doing?
They have literally said that that's why they're doing what they're doing. They have not previously blocked those routes for any other reason except this one. So yes, I do. And I also think the West needs to start to understand that you cannot just go around playing cowboys in the world. There are consequences to your actions. You cannot just go around bombing people's countries, ignoring international law and expect no repercussions. For every cause, there is a consequence. And just because you don't like a couple of guys trying to resist,
I mean, these
the fact
are
that this is
now prescribed terrorists.
Sure, according to Western governments,
well,
they are
also
terrorist
according to the
governments,
Yemeni people, because they've
which is a Saudi-backed government, which is essentially our.
But the Yemenis who live, under Houthi rule talk about the fact that this group continues to terrorise them as well.
Yeah, I'm no fan of the Houthis, apart from when they're blockading in favour of a ceasefire, which should have been called a long time ago.
Bill Browder, I'm just going to bring you into the conversation.
We started the whole conversation an hour ago about how you can't afford housing and your generation and so on and so forth. These people are creating a total trade blockade, which is causing inflation, which is causing all sorts of problems to everybody.
25,000 people are dead in Gaza right now. There are over 60,000 people injured with no access to food, water, aid. How dare we have a conversation about trade when there are children right now being treated without anaesthetic? Well, there are things that require us to make some sacrifices, and this would be one of them.
They do have the global economy, global markets hostage.
Good for them.
Bill Browder?
Good for them. Ceasefire now. Okay. Ceasefire now.
We're going to have to leave it there. But Dr. Miriam Francois,
you cannot allow these people to be decimated and expect there to be no consequences.
I think that is a separate conversation. But we do have about 20 seconds left. Dr. Miriam Francois, Bill Browder, thank you both for joining us here on the programme. Now, that's all for our very first programme. As you can see, quite a heated debate. We've had that breaking news of a second round of strikes against the Houthi rebels in the Red Sea. And earlier on in the programme, we heard from the man who could soon be Foreign Secretary about his fears for an isolationist foreign policy if Donald Trump returns to the White House. So lots to discuss as we've launched this new foreign affairs show here, discussing and trying to make sense of big global affairs and the impact on us here in the UK. We'll be back tomorrow as people in New Hampshire cast their votes for the Republican nomination. Will Donald Trump tighten his grip on the party even further? A question for another day, maybe. Thanks for watching. The news at 10 is next. Thanks so much.